Alhamdulillah wahda, wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da. Today we will cover the topic of sajdatul sahw, the prostration of forgetfulness. What are the situations and how do we do it? Forgetfulness or doubt or oversight are all considered the same thing, and they all follow the same rules. Whether one didn't realize, got bit of a mistake, or they forgot about something during the prayer, this is all considered a mistake, a sahab, and they have to perform sajda sahab in order to save their prayer. So what are the situations where they can compensate or make up their prayer by doing extra two sajdas? And there are certain situations where they have to repeat the prayer. So broadly speaking, if one forgets and doesn't perform a wajib act in the prayer, then they have to perform two sajda of sahw, sajda prostration. Sajda means prostration. So two of those they have to do of forgetfulness, of a mistake, of a sahw. And then they continue with the tashahud again, and then they would say salam. Even if one makes several mistakes, several wajibat have been missed, they still can do one set of two sajda to compensate or to make up for those mistakes. They do not need to do separately or individually for all the mistakes. One should suffice. So just a quick recap or revision of what are the actions. There are different categories of action. There are certain action in prayer. Those acts are called faraid or fard or rukun, the pillars, the essential integral part of the prayer. If you miss any of those fard action, your prayer is nullified unless you make it up, means you do that action and then do sajda sahw. So what are those 6 actions which are faraid? We cover in a second, just as a recap, just as a quick revision. And the wajibat are the action which in prayers, if missed, you can make up by doing sajdatul sahw only. In fard, you have to do that action and then sajdatul sahw. In wajibat, in the case of wajibat, if you miss one of those, then you just do sajda sahw. You don't have to repeat that action, or you don't have to do that action at all. Whereas if you miss any sunnah or nawafil or mustahab action, there's no problem. You don't have to do sajda sahw. Obviously, the more sunnah you embellish your prayers with, the more beneficial and meritorious it would be for you. Faraid action are these 6. So your niyyah, intention, your qiyam. In fact, it shouldn't be niyyah because niyyah actually goes before prayer. At the beginning of the prayer, or you can say before we start the prayer, it should be takbir tahrima. So takbir tahrima, the first beginning takbir. The takbir that makes everything else which is not part of prayer to be haram. So you make things haram, like talking, eating. So this takbir, you put your hand up to the ears and then you say Allahu Akbar. So putting everything behind you and connecting yourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's glorification. So Allahu Akbar, that takbir in the beginning is takbir tahrima. So that is a rukun of the prayer. Then qiyam is standing, just mere standing. And then qira'ah, recitation of Quran. Some part of Quran has to be recited to be a fard action. Then ruku', when you bow down, and then 2 sajdas in each rakat, and then qa'da akhira, final sitting. These 6 are, according to Hanafi fiqh, are faraid, are obligatory stuff, obligatory actions. If you miss any of these, you have to do that action and then do sajda sahw. The reason you do sajda sahw is because you have, by missing that fard action and then doing it at a later time, some other time, you have changed the order. An order, to keep the order, is wajib. So what are the wajib? Two in whole prayer. One is to keep the order, to maintain that order. So for example, if you forgot to do your ruku in first rakat or second rakat, and then you realize in third or fourth rakat that actually I didn't do my ruku, or I did only one sajda, I forgot to recite anything in qira'ah, in qiyam, when I was standing up, I didn't recite anything, I just did the sajda on your own, not talking about jama'ah. Then you realize right at the end, so you have to do that action, standing up and doing the ruku or whatever action you missed, but you have done this action which was fard not in orderly fashion, rather outside of the order. You just disorderly did it, though you did it, but the order was missed. So for that reason, you have to do sajda sahab to compensate for that wajib action which has been omitted, which was to keep the order. So you have to keep the order of tartib and calmness, called ta'dil of arkan. The ta'dil of arkan means that we should do all the action in such a way that our body is really composed. It is not done in hasty way. It shouldn't be doing very fast. So that is why we say takbirat and tasbihat 3 times. Tasbihat in in ruku and sajda thrice, so as to keep that minimum action duration, so you do not miss out on that. It's wajib to do the ta'dil. So if you did quickly, unfortunately, even sajda sahab would not be able to compensate for that, because this is not done forgetfully. This is done for a bad habit. Most people do not hasten their prayer or do not pray their prayers very fast because they forgot. Rather, they have a bad habit, and habit is not considered in sahab. It is just a habit. One has to undo it. So there are 5 wajibat in qira'ah, which is recitation. I'm just revising and recapping quickly. We have already done that in previous lessons. So to recite Surah Fatiha is wajib in each rakat. To recite it before other surah, I mean, order should be maintained there as well. And 1 long or 3 short ayah in the first 2 rakat of first prayer. Likewise, 1 long and 3 short ayah or 3 short ayah in all the rakat of wajibat and sunnah muakkada, sunnah ghair muakkada, and nafil prayers. Okay, every rakat should have that as well. These are all wajibat. And likewise, reciting aloud in certain prayer, which is your fajr, your maghrib and isha, first 2 rakat of maghrib and isha, both rakat in Jum'ah. If you're reciting, if you're reading together with it in Ramadan, then it should be loud as well. Likewise, your Eid prayer, likewise, Taraweeh prayer. So reciting Surah Fatiha and Surah after that aloud in these prayer is all wajib. And then there are 5 from Qawma to Salam. Qawma itself, Qawma means after Ruku, you stand up. Ruku is fard. After Ruku, when you stand up for a brief period and say, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan. If you said that duration, or just standing for saying Sami Allahu liman hamida and Rabbana lakal hamd, that is a short standing. It's called Qawma. So it is wajib as well. Or Jalsa, after that, you're sitting between 2 sajda. After first sajda, you sit down for a while, and it's good to say Rabbi ghfirli, minimum. And then tashahhud should be done in both qa'da. In both qa'da, both sittings, one should say tashahhud, at-tahiyyatu lillah up to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And sitting in the first qa'da, sitting in the first qa'da, in the first, if there were 2 qa'da in any prayer, one should sit down for both of those. First, second qa'da or second sitting, as you know, is rukun, is fard. Okay, Whereas first sitting in the prayer where there are two qadas is not fard, is actually a wajib. Okay. So 5 from qawma to salam, sitting in the first qada, then qawma, jalsa, tashahud in both qadas, sitting. So that sitting is reciting at-tahiyatu lillahi wa salawat. That is tashahud. And sitting, just mere sitting per se. So that is wajib as well in the first qada, in first sitting. And then salam. And to any other specific prayers like extra takbir and qunut in witr and 6 takbirat in Eid. So these are in brief wajibat in the prayer. Okay, so you miss any of those being missed, you have to do sajda sahw. Okay, if you miss fard, you have to say that action, you have to do that action and then say your sajda sahw. After final tashahhud, final sitting, you have said your tashahhud up to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, pointing your finger, and then you turn to the right, say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, turn your head to the right, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then you perform 2 sajda. Okay, this is then followed by reciting your tashahhud again, durood Ibrahimi again, and dua, and then you conclude it with salam on both sides. This is how you do in Hanafi school. If you said your sajda before you said salam, which some imams advocate, and there are hadiths to support this and there are hadiths to support that. Both ways are according to a hadith. So some imam has taken this way, this view, and some has taken that view. For example, it is imam, I will cover that in a minute actually. Other imams have their way of doing differently. Anyway, but if according to Hanafi school, if someone did the sajda before salam, it is disliked, though your sajda is considered done. If someone deliberately, knowingly omits a wajib, I don't want to do that, then they have committed a sin. They must repeat their prayer. They cannot make up while doing sajda sahw. They can't do sajda sahw in this situation except for three cases. We come to that in a minute. Those 3 situations are where you can do sajda sahw even if you deliberately, voluntarily, knowingly omitted a wajib action. What are those action? If one intentionally omits the first setting of tashahhud, you shouldn't have done that, but if you did it, you've committed a sin. Yet, if you did that and now you're praying and right at the end you did your sajda sahw, your prayer will still be considered done, valid. Second situation is one deliberately delays the prostration from the first rak'at to the end of the prayer. Okay. So sajda that you were supposed to do, you didn't do, you just did right at the end. Sajda of the first rak'at, you didn't do. After ruku, you stood up and not doing the sajda, and you right at the end you realize and you did, oh, you knew it, but you did it right at the end. Sinful, but it still will validate your prayer after sajda sahw, obviously, because the order is being missed. And if someone was thinking about something and it took them so long, intentionally, and keeps thinking, am I doing, which surah am I going to recite? And it was long enough duration, the duration of recitation of Subhanallah 3 times, Subhanallah al-Azim, Subhanallah, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, any of these kalimat, you could say 3 times. That duration, if you stayed quiet, pondering over something, and delayed knowingly, and then continued with your prayer, so that prayer would still be okay if you have done your sajda sahw right at the end, which means that you shouldn't delay it. Accidentally doing, even then you have to do sajda sahw. But if you did intentionally, you have committed a sin, yet the prayer could be made up for. It is still salvageable by sajda sahw in these 3 conditions. It is sunnah to perform the prostration of forgetfulness after finishing the salam, because of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he did it after that, the Sahih hadith about that. and he said that as well. Yet Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh would take another hadith, and there are many on that situation as well, whereby Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has performed his two sajdas before saying salam. And Imam Malik has both. So if there was any deficiency, then he would say you would do before salam your sajda, two sajdas. And if you have done some extra action and thereby you cause a wajib to be delayed or farz to be delayed, and a situation arises where you had to do the sajda sahab, then you would do it afterwards, after salam. So if you have a deficiency, you would follow Imam Shafi'i view. If you have done some extra action, you follow Imam Abu Hanifa's view. This is Imam Malik's view. So the way we remember it is al-qafu bil-qaf wal-dalu bil-dal. Qaf with qaf, dal with dal. Qaf means naqs. Qaf of naqs, nuqsan, deficiency. That nuqsan goes with qabl. Qabl means before salam. So you do not say salam, you say tashahhud and just do two sajda and then salam. You don't have to repeat tashahhud according to Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayh. And what dalu bid dal, if there was any ziyadati, ziyada means zada yazidu means excess, something in excess, something extra you have done, then you would do it ba'd. There's dal in ba'd as well. So dal with dal, qaf with qaf. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal has the view that whichever situation Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam Sahaba narrated from him, we just do exactly the same. So, for example, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that because he missed Surah Fatiha or some surah after that or something else, then he did it this way. We just stick to that. Where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam missed this rukun and he did it afterwards, and the order is changed, he did it that way, we follow that. So Imam Ahmad say we just stick to every situation that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did and keep it like that. But the situations which are other than what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's action has been narrated to us, we don't know, because he never made those sort of mistakes in his prayer. What about those? So then he would stick with Imam Abu Hanifa's view and Imam Shafi'i's view. He has got multiple views on that as well. So, but generally, these are the three main views that people would take. But Imam Abu Hanifa or Hanafi school take the view that you should do it after salam, and there are many reasons why they would prefer this. As Imam Shafi has his views and why he would prefer that, inshallah ta'ala. So we should only say salam on one side, not both sides. And because if you've said salam on the other side as well, then you have completed your prayer. And it is just generally considered a disliked action. Although some say that you should do salam on both sides and then do it, even within Hanafi school. But the muftabi qawl, or the relied upon position, is that we should do that after right side salam, not the left side. When is sajdatul sahab excused? Couple of situations. If you were praying your fajr quite late and you've just done a mistake, you made a mistake, you needed to do your sajda sahab, but as you were doing it, sun appeared, means sun rises. As you're doing it, the sun rises. Then you are absolved from that sajda sahab, because you can't do sajda while sun is rising. So then you are exempted. You just complete your prayer by saying salam and leave that prayer. That will be excused. Obviously, you're delaying your fajr to that late time without an excuse would be, a bad thing. But if there was a reason, inshallah ta'ala, then it's okay. And likewise, performing your asr too late, that if you were to do your sajda sahab, this is about the time when sun is getting paler, where you can have a look at that, and this is a disliked time for asr prayer. If you had excuse to delay up to that time, then it is okay, your prayer is still valid. Yet you are absolved from sajdatul sahab if you had made any mistake in that prayer during that time. And likewise, if you've said salam on both sides and then you talk to someone, intentionally you broke your wudu, you laughed, or you turn around, then whatever action you have done to nullify your prayer or end your prayer, then your prayer is done. Then you cannot do your sajda sahab after that. Then it would be considered okay, inshallah ta'ala. Obviously, if that was done because you were supposed to do that wajib, so you are expected that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would let it pass. Okay, but again, generally, if there is time, enough time, you should try and repeat that prayer. If Imam makes a mistake, the muqtadi, the follower, has to follow Imam. He cannot say that since I didn't make any mistake, I'm not going to follow Imam. You are to follow Imam. You have to stick with the Imam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not change, do not be different in your prayer from your Imam. And he's responsible, so you just follow him. When you make a mistake, he would do sajda sahab, you do sajda sahab. That is why Imams tend to recite their tashahhud up to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah and do sajda sahab. Generally speaking, the preferred view, which is not normally taught to general masses, is that ideally one should do their recitation up to the end, including Durood Ibrahim, and then they should say salam on the right side. But for Imams, the preferred view is that they should say tashahhud, and after tashahhud they should say salam, so that the people who are praying behind do not hastily say salam onto the other side and then come out of the iqtida of Imam, following of the Imam. Because there are people who would have missed their 1 or 2 rakat, the masbuq, the latecomers. So as soon as Imam says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, some of them get ready to stand up. And the minute he said of the second salam, they would just stand up. And he may be actually saying Allahu Akbar to go in sajda. So if he were to say it after Durood Ibrahimi, people would know that he has sat there long enough and he must have completed his prayer. He must have concluded it. So you, as Imam, would want to not cause trouble to people and just say tashahhud and say salam, so people automatically realize that, you know what, he has done his salam very quickly. It must be a mistake that he has to do sajda sahab for. Anyway, latecomers have to join Imam likewise. If the latecomer or muqtadi, masbuq, join Imam and then he did not do sajda sahab with Imam, he stood up, his jama'ah is not considered done. If the muqtadi who came late, even if the mistake that Imam made was done in the rak'at that he did not join Imam in, means he was in there in the first 2 rakat with Imam and Imam made a mistake in second rakat, he joined in 4th rakat or 3rd rakat, even then he has to join the Imam for sajda sahab. If he said, Imam said salam and he stood up and he continued with his prayer, now his prayer would be nullified. He needs to start again. Okay, he has to sit down again. A muqtadi, even he makes a mistake behind Imam, it doesn't make him obliged to perform any sajda sahab on his own, because he is dependent on Imam's prayer. He wouldn't do any sajda sahab. He would do sajda sahab if he made a mistake in his missed prayers, missed rakat. So for example, he had 2 rakat with Imam, 2 on his own. So the mistake that he made in the 2 rakat that he performed himself, he has to do sajda sahab in those 2. Okay. Okay. Ideally, Imam are generally advised to not perform sajdatul sahab in Eid and Friday prayers for the fact the large gathering might get completely confused. But Alhamdulillah, slowly, people are getting used to of it. So this is in the days when we did not have microphones, people wouldn't know what's happening. And when they find Imam saying salam, they wouldn't know whether it's the first salam or is sajda sahab or what. And people can get confused. Large gatherings can get confused. There weren't many mukabbirun, many people who could say it loud. And by the time the 50th saf or 15th saf hears the takbir, people have gone haywire here and there. So it was then recommended that the imams don't do it and leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hope that the prayer would be considered done. But nowadays, alhamdulillah, with the use of mic, people can hear very clearly at the same time and they can follow imam without having trouble, alhamdulillah. So it's okay these days. If one forgets to perform the qa'dah in an obligatory prayer, he must return and sit down, provided that he has not he hasn't assumed the standing posture, qiyam. And how do we know whether he is standing or sitting? Which side he's closer to. So as long as his legs are not straightened, okay, so he should sit down. So if he has not raised his back up and is still rising, and he realized halfway through and is more close towards this tashahud or sitting position, he should just go back in sitting position. If he is already been standing closer to standing position, then he should come and stand up and make up with sajda sahab right at the end. If a follower behind the imam forgets to sit, then his case is like the one who offers a voluntary prayer. He is to return and sit even if he was completely standing because he is a follower. For muqtadi has to follow imam. Muqtadi cannot say that since I have already stood up, I cannot go back in tashahud, which you can't if you're praying on your own. Or the imam leading the people. If he stood up from the second sajda of second rakat, he was supposed to sit down in tashahud, but he forgot about that. He stood up, and he actually nearly stood up, and then he realized. So the imam must stay up because he has done more than 50% of standing already. And likewise, if someone is praying on their own. But if you're praying behind imam, then no matter how much you've spent your time in standing, you have to go back to join imam. If you were close to standing position and yet you decided to go down and do your tashahud, the first qa'dah, at-tahiyyat, you sat down from standing, then you have to do two sajda of forgetfulness. When the bottom half of the body is straightened up, okay, back is still leaning, but the bottom half is straightened, then you are close to standing position, and then you should stay standing. Don't go in tashahud in the first qa'dah. Obviously, if it was qa'dah akhira, then you have to do that. If you were close to sitting position, if the legs were not straightened, then you're close to sitting position and you went back to your tashahud, you're sitting, your qa'dah position, then you do not need to offer sajdatul sahab. Some say if you went back after standing to your sitting position, then your prayer is actually nullified. But the muftabi qawl, or the relied upon position, is that no, it doesn't nullify your prayer. It is okay. But obviously, you will have to do sajda sahab. But if you didn't do your last sitting, which is fard now, The first sitting was wajib. This is fard. This is a rukun. And then you stood up in your fifth rakat and you're reciting your surah or whatever. Then you realize, so you must come back to your sitting position, provided you have not done your sajda of fifth rakat, the extra rakat that you're doing. So you're in your fourth rakat. Rather than sitting down in your fourth rakat of Dhuhr, you stood up and you were reciting your surah, Fatiha and surah and ruku, and you're about to go to sajda. You realize, oh, this is my fifth rakat. Then you can sit down there and do your tashahhud and then salam and then sajdatul sahw, because you delayed your final sitting. Okay, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that. But if you in the fifth rakat recited surah Fatiha and your surah and your ruku and you are in your sajda, so now you have completed your sajda, means the fifth rakat is done, then you cannot come back to sitting down, because now you have completed your rakat. You have completed your fifth rakat and you cannot nullify it. You have to do extra rakat, and it would become your nafil prayer. Imam Abu Yusuf held that the prayer is no longer regarded as obligatory from the moment one places his hands on the floor for the prostration in the extra rakat, which is fifth in this case. While Imam Muhammad rahmatullah would say that when one's forehead is raised from the floor, means once you've completed yourself, and he may add a sixth rakat if he wishes, even if it was in the Asr prayer or the fourth rakat in Fajr, as it is desirable to complete this voluntary prayer which was not originally intended. So then you would be having your nafil. These would all be considered your nafil prayer. So you were supposed to sit down in your fourth rakat. You didn't sit, you stood up. You recited your surah, you completed this rakat, then you have to do another rakat to make it six, all nafil prayer, even if it is your Asr prayer and even if it is your Fajr prayer, to make it nafil. Because they were not intended, so it is fine to add extra rakat. So at this point, you do not need to do sajda sahw, because what is rendered deficient by an invalidating factor cannot be mended, because that was your qa'da, which was fard, and a fard is omitted. You cannot compensate for that. And in nafil prayer, it is okay, it is permissible with some, obviously, involuntarily, if someone has done that they didn't do their sitting, it wasn't fard for that reason. In nafil, it is okay to omit that sitting. Okay, so that is why it would be your nafil prayer, but you have to then do your fard obviously afterwards. Hence, you do not need to do sajda sahw. It is considered, because there are hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam whereby he would just do his nafil prayer standing in first rakat, second rakat he would stand up, third rakat he would stand up, and finally he would sit down. So there is a leeway in nafil prayers. Since it is all becoming nafil, you do not need to worry about your qada akhira, which you miss anyway. But if you sat down in tashahhud, in fourth rakat tashahhud, at-tahiyyat, up to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, which was rukun, which was fard, which was must to sit down in, one of the six rukuns or the fard action of the prayer. So if you have done that much, then you're fine. Then you do not need to worry about that. You can sit down and you can just say salam. Your prayer is done. Because now you have already done your final rukun of the prayer. Although you didn't do your tashahhud to the Durud Ibrahimi and dua and then salam, but Durud Ibrahimi recitation there and dua are sunnah. So you missed that, but you've done your fard and you stood up thinking that you needed to do extra rakat or two rakat. You thought it was second rakat, but it was actually fourth rakat. Then you recited that much and you stood up. So then it's all fine. You can come back, sit down without reciting anything because you've already recited what you needed to recite, and just say salam, and then your prayer is done. Obviously, if you've done one complete rakat of extra rakat, which is through the sajda of the fifth rakat, and you have done your tashahhud up to at-tahiyyatu lillah wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and then you stood up, and then you realize after fifth rakat, actually this is my fifth rakat. Then your prayer, obligatory prayer, is done because you sat down to the amount of at-tahiyyatu lillah up to ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. That was required, you have done it. So then you add extra rakat after this fifth rakat, which you have done sajda on. You would do a sixth rakat. So the first four would be considered your fard, and these two would be considered your sunnah. I mean nafil, other than fard. And you'll be rewarded for that. You would just do a salam right at the end, but you would do sajdatul sahv here as well. Why? Because you delayed your salam. Final salam was done, not straight into the fourth rakat, but at the sixth rakat. But you would get your fard, 4 fard completed, but also 2 nafil on top of that. But one shouldn't try to do it. Obviously, it happens accidentally. Now, if someone was doing 2 nafil and they had made a mistake, they did their sajdatul sahv there, then they shouldn't add any 2 rakat, meaning making it 4 nafil. Because if you did it, which for nafil you are allowed to make it 4 or 6 or 8, but don't do that if you have already done sajdatul sahv and then you let me just do 2 more rakat. Don't do it, because those sajdatul sahv would be nullified. Sajdatul sahv should be done right at the end, not in the middle of the prayer. And if you made a mistake, but you still added extra 2 rakat, then you have to do your sajda sahv again right at the end, because those sajdatul sahv that you've done in the middle is not counted. Again, if someone joins you while you are doing your sajdatul sahv, and someone joins you right at the end when you are doing as your own prayer mistake and you're doing your sajda sahv, if they join you and they have done sajda sahv with you, then they are considered a muqtadi. Their prayer is done with jama'ah with you. And if he didn't do it, obviously his jama'ah is invalid. Okay. According to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf, and Imam Muhammad and Imam Zufar would say that no, it's fine. Your prayer is still okay. But we take the view that you shouldn't do that. You should just follow Imam. If Imam is doing sajda sahv, don't think at all. Just follow it. When they're required to perform prostration of forgetfulness, even if he deliberately gives salam intending to cut off the prayer, provided one does not turn away from the qibla or speak after having offered the salam. And some say if you haven't spoken or left the masjid. Means then if you keep your posture and you're still facing qibla, you can then still continue with your sajda sahv if you forgot to do it earlier. But if you moved away from the place or left the masjid, then you have to start your prayer all over again. Again, if you've just done 4 rakat or 3 rakat, but you've said salam earlier, then you haven't changed your position, you haven't talked to anyone, you haven't moved from the place, then you can do the rest of the prayer, but do sajdatul sahv because you have made a mistake there. Again, if you delay your next rukun, so you were sitting, likewise, when you're sitting in tashahhud, for example, the first sitting, at-tahiyyat, you've said, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, and then You started your Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, this much, which is a statement. It's sunnah. But you delayed your next rak'at qiyam, which is standing, for this sunnah action. So to delay your fard action is a mistake. And then you have to do sajdatul sahw. Likewise, if you're sitting there and you haven't said your salam after dua, you keep sitting, not doing anything, not even doing any dua, thinking and delaying it, then you've delayed your salam for no reason. You still have to do your sajdatul sahw there as well. So I hope it clarifies some of the situation. Inshallah ta'ala, if there was any question you can ask, and you can ask in the group as well. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.